In the 1970s, you could go to a public university and pay for it with a part-time minimum wage job. You could actually just work in the summer and pay your tuition for the entire year. And in order to do that today, you actually would need to work more than full-time at the minimum wage at the same time that you go to college. And that is the equation that is not adding up for young people today. You know, the cost of college has gone up more than any other good or service for the last 20 years. The reasons behind that, they're very, very complex, but I think they boil down to the idea that we had a very expansionary promise for a good portion of the 20th century where we kept wanting to send more people to college and paying to send more people to college. And that expansion hit a stopping point at some point in the mid-60s, late 60s. And it was very much concurrent with the rise of the student revolt and the student movement, where students were suddenly being viewed as being actually a dangerous force or a subversive force. And the national commitment to making a college education a broad social entitlement really kind of snapped back. And it has just really been declining from the peak that it reached in the 70s all this time. The public university systems have been established in the 19th century as bulwarks of the public good and of economic expansion and development in states all across the country. In the 1980s and in the 1990s, they started to be the targets of cost shifting. And so what would happen typically is, you know, the governor and the state legislators start to say, we don't need to be paying for all the stuff that they're doing. So they cut funding to state universities. State universities very naturally respond by raising tuition. The tuition increase gets absorbed by higher and higher federal student loans. And so there's cost shifting that happens, and state funding to higher education institutions hit a 25-year low in 2006. With the death of the union-supported job, the death of benefits and middle-class jobs for high school graduates, you need a college degree. And everyone from the president on down is saying you have to get a college degree. And yet you have this phenomenon of families, of students standing up and saying, wait a minute, I can't pay for this. You know, this is more than half of the median income. You know, in almost every state except for California gets an F for affordability when it comes to the cost of a public university for the average family. So how do we pay for this? Is it really worth it? Even if I have to have it, what happens when I can't pay for it? And those are the questions that you know, are starting to be asked, that people are looking around and saying, I worked so hard to try to get this education, and now it's something that's really beyond this family's reach, and what are we supposed to do? The college landscape already is significantly and extremely changing. You have the growth of community colleges, which now enroll over half of all undergraduates. You have the growth of for-profit colleges, which are ballooning in size, from the University of Phoenix, one of the largest universities in America, with 450,000 students. The landscape is changing. Many colleges are proliferating in this niche of affordable quality, which is really, you know, more than a niche. It's actually what everyone is clamoring for. And many innovators are coming in and saying, well, we can change the model. We don't have to be locked into this situation of constantly spiraling cost, because there are ways to use technology to bring down the cost of higher education. And that is everything from, you know, a free lecture that's available video on demand, or a open source textbook that can be downloaded and read by 100,000 people simultaneously, or peer group learning that happens in social networks instead of happening in a classroom. And these hybrid models of technology with experiential education, so that's workplace-based education, internship-focused education that gets you really out in the world to get really relevant experience, that also is cheaper than the classroom model. So the combination of the technology-based and the experiential-based, I'm seeing that proliferating into much, much more affordable education, much more sustainable education in the long term.